Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining the webinar. We'll just allow attendees to come in, and in the meantime, just while we get the webinar going, please make use of the chat. It's really great when people just tell us which country they're in at the moment, give us a sense of the geography of the attendees, and it helps you to use the chat facility so you can find out where it is and how things are going there. So I'm going to put that in. So I'm based in the UK. I'm Michaela Bolivar, Cape Town, Palestine. Great. So please keep that going. That's really helpful to see that. Cold and damp here as well, Charlie. And some nice sunny in Cape Town, hopefully. Okay, we've had a really lot of interest in this webinar. We've got, as of today, between the two webinars, the one now and the one later on, we've got over 221 people have registered, so it shows a lot of interest in this topic. And a big thank you for Fraser for putting the effort in to put the webinar together. Fraser has also created a case study around this that we're going to share out as well for people who are interested. Some of the mechanics around the webinar. So we've got the chat there, so you can use that for general comments and ideas. We've also got the Q&A open, the question and answer. Now, if you can use that if you've got specific questions, and we really encourage people to ask questions. Because of the numbers of people on the webinar, it's not possible to have everyone on video and on the microphone talking around it. So the way we're doing it is through the Q&A facility, and we will find times either at the end of Fraser's presentation or some point during it where we will pause and get some of the questions answered, and then hopefully that creates more debate and keep the questions going. And the question about recording and slides, so what we will do is make these available after the event. There's a little bit of admin involved around that, so it will probably be next week when we'll make those available on the website, and everyone who's attended will send an email letting you know that they are there. Okay, right, well, that's a good range of people there. Japan and the Maldives I've seen, and lots in Australia as well. That's fantastic. Okay, so what we will do now, just for those who are new to SFIA, so this is not about presenting the nuts and bolts and how SFIA works. So we've taken an assumption that people have got a general understanding around that. But just to give you a sense of where we are, the SFIA Foundation and the SFIA framework have been around since the year 2000. It's used globally and over time has evolved from its original purpose, which was very focused on ICT skills, to something much broader, reflecting how the industry's changed and the roles and professions have grown into a broader framework with a broader set of skills. And we attract a lot of interest from different from employers, education establishments, and lots of individuals who make use of SFIA too. The SFIA Foundation is a very small not-for-profit organisation. There's minimal overhead, and everything we do is all focused on investing into the framework development, which we update every 3 years, and also providing resources and support for the SFIA community. So it's quite unique in terms of where the foundation operates. And what we focus on, being community driven, so we do things that the community finds useful and make sure we're keeping things up to date with the rapidly changing world around technology and business areas. We focus on having open collaboration, what we create. So the aim is that people know what's coming, that employees who use it are not taken by surprise by changes. They can keep using it between updates, real focus on that. And then having the framework freely available so that it can be downloaded and used across the globe is really important. So it's not behind a paywall or anything like that people have to get past in order to access the material. We do ask you to register because that helps us know the size of the community. and the framework itself is neutral in terms of vendors and technologies, so it does not limit to a particular view of the world or a particular product set. It's very neutral in that respect. And lastly, it is available, it's translated, and there's people on the call who have helped out with the translations, and we really appreciate that effort. Okay, if there's any questions about the SFIA Foundation, you can ask them on this call or the SFIA framework, please do, but we may just find a different route to answer those, not via Fraser. And then finally, Fraser and ourselves are really keen that this is an area that we could be doing more in to support. And this is a slide that will appear at the end of the presentation, but I know that people will often have to move on to their next meeting or need to go to their have their evening meals and move on. So just in case you do that, just be aware up front that we are interested in doing some further collaboration. We want to hear from people who want to join in taking some of this further, and what the SFIA Foundation can do to help that. And there's some emails there that you can get in touch with, or via the contacts on the website as well. And if there are others who'd like to share their story on a webinar like Fraser's doing, we'd really appreciate that as well. So that's coming up, just as a warning. And without anything more from me, we'll turn to Fraser. I first came across Fraser about 4 years ago. We were having chats with some other educational providers, and it's been a really fascinating story to see where Fraser and the University of Strathclyde have got to with this. That's a really good presentation, and I hope you can stay around for it. So, Fraser, do you want to take over? Okay, I can see that.
Can you see that? Fantastic, good start. And you can hear me okay?
Yes, yep.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to Peter and Ian for organising this and inviting me to present. So I'm Fraser Macdonald. I am a teaching fellow here at the University of Strathclyde, Department of Computer and Information Sciences. I've been in that role probably for about 5 or so years, mostly working on the apprenticeship side of things in the university. Prior to that, I worked in the industry for 21 years or so. So technical background, initially as a software developer, and then sort of took on more kind of senior engineering roles, and then more, I guess, commercial and business development and managerial type roles. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I decided that it was time for a bit of a career change. I'm interested in working in academia. And when I heard about apprenticeships, I thought, oh, this sounds really interesting. This is something I would like to be involved in. So here we are. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the apprenticeships in general, just because I know that some people may not be fully aware of the apprenticeship, and I mean degree apprenticeship schemes work. I'll talk about our model of work-based learning, which is a key component within the apprenticeships that we deliver. And I'll talk obviously about SFIA and our use within the model that we have. And then, as Peter's already alluded to, some next steps around the kind of things that we are thinking about and would like to collaborate on. So Apprenticeship Strathclyde, we have been delivering apprenticeships, I think, for about 8 years now. And they are delivered across basically all subject areas within the university, and we deliver them at undergraduate and postgraduate level. So quite simply, the apprenticeship allows the learner to get the degree at the same time as being in employment. So this is a win-win for them. So they get to study, they get the academic side of life, and they also get good experience in the industry as well while we do that. So we offer both graduate apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships. Graduate apprenticeships being the Scottish version, if you like, and degree apprenticeships being the English version. So there are different funding around those, slightly different sets of rules around delivery and all that kind of stuff. Today, I'm going to focus on the specific one that we deliver, which is in IT software development. That's a graduate apprenticeship, so that's a Scottish one. And that's delivered by our Department of Computer and Information Sciences. So the way that we deliver apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships, and this is different for different educational providers, there are different models of this, but our particular model is that we have a very blended approach. So the learner spends 4 days a week in the workplace doing their sort of day job, and they spend 1 day a week on university work. This program is 4 years in duration. They have 3 12-week terms that they work on, so it's a longer, effectively academic year than a traditional face-to-face degree. All the core material they use is delivered through our virtual learning environment, and that means they can study at a time and a place convenient to them. So there's no need for them to be on campus too much, apart from mandatory days that we have every 4 weeks, and then there are other non-mandatory on-campus activities. So we see them basically 3 times per term on campus, and that's usually for assessment. But other than that, they can go and they can study at a pace and a place of their choosing as well. And I put here the focus is on producing career-ready graduates. But the reality is that this isn't a thing that they get to the end of their apprenticeship and that's them career ready. The reality is that they actually add value to the employers very early on in this whole programme. So literally after a few weeks of being in the workplace, a little bit of study, we find they actually can be adding value to their employers. And I'll just point out the programme and general all the programmes are accredited by the British Computer Society as well. So apprentices are a really interesting sort of set of learners. So we have quite a diverse range in terms of experience. So some of them, in fact, quite a few of them are actually straight out of school, so no particular experience. We have some that perhaps want to change careers, so maybe have done something else for a couple of years, but have decided actually software development is where they want to be, and they're sort of maybe making a move into that particular career. And you've got some who maybe have been in industry for a few years and probably have quite technical roles, and really they want to get the degree perhaps because they want to apply for promotion and generally move on in the career, and that they need to effectively tick that degree box to do that. So a wide range of experience. We work with a very wide range of employers. So some of our employers are very small, so 2 to 3 people. Some of them are absolutely massive. I'm not going to name drop any names, but there are a number of large financial service organisations in Glasgow on our doorstep that we have a large number of apprentices with. So they work for a very different set of employers in terms of scale and also in terms of the particular domains that those employers are in as well. So we have people that work in space technology, we have people that work in finance, we have people that are general project-based organisations that deliver IT services to government, and everything else in between as well. And we also have quite a diverse sort of set of roles that the apprentices are engaged in. So some are very much straightforward software development type roles, some of them have slightly broader roles, some of them are more kind of business analyst type roles, and lots of different things. We have one person at the moment who is actually working on talking about space and designing circuit boards for a satellite. Now, I think one of the best things about the apprenticeship is the amount of support that the individual learner gets, and I've tried to summarise that here for you. So in the workplace, they have a line manager that looks after them on a day-to-day basis in terms of determining the kind of work that they should be doing. Generally speaking, they'll have access to a mentor, so that's someone else in the workplace who can sort of guide and help them on their career path that they can go to that's outside of the line management chain, can provide useful advice there. And they're also, certainly in the larger employers, and there's an apprenticeship lead. So that's someone who's managing all of the apprentices across the programmes as well. From the university's point of view, they have a key person, and I say that because I'm one of them, a learning advisor who's somebody who will help with their work-based learning. And they have a year head who basically coordinates the programme year that they're in, and they can help their apprentice as well. And then overall is a programme lead as well, who has ultimate responsibility for delivering the programme. So there's a kind of level of escalation around all of that. So there's a lot of coordination and communication between all of these people in terms of making sure that the apprentice is being supported, flagging up any issues that may be happening. Perhaps the apprentice is struggling in particular areas, or maybe they're not engaging particularly well. And we can pick that up very quickly, and we can chat to the employer about that and figure out how do we support the apprentice and how do we get them to move forward in the programme as well. So I think that's really one of the very key elements of the programme, and I think that contributes to the very high success rate that we have in terms of people completing the programme, and also in terms of the attainment that they reach within the programme as well. So I'm here today to talk about work-based learning. That was just an introduction to the basics of apprenticeships and how we deliver them. Work-based learning is practical learning experience in the workplace, what it says on the tin. And it's about integrating the theory and the practice. So we're taking the academic concepts that have been learned in university and applying them in the workplace. But it's also about the other kind of wider workplace experience as well. So the other things that the apprentices get involved in and the other kind of skills that they demonstrate in the workplace as well. So for ITSD, this is a very hefty chunk of the programme. So they get 25%, over 25% of the credits for the programme are obtained through work-based learning. So it is absolutely key that the apprentice engages in this and that they do really well. And it does run through the entire programme. So every year of the 4 years, there's some degree of work-based learning in there on the way through. And then in 4th year, it leads straight into their honours project, which is another significant chunk of the programme. So taking a little bit of a step back, and if I think about how we have evolved our approach to work-based learning over the past sort of 5 years or so, the kind of problem that we are actually trying to solve probably summarised in this way. So how do we deliver work-based learning to apprentices with a variety of backgrounds and job roles, and I've sort of summarised those previously, in an academically rigorous manner, because we're a university and we have to do this rigorously. We don't want to over-assess because we know that learners don't like being over-assessed, and we also know that that's a significant amount of resource on our part in doing that, conducting that assessment. And generally speaking, we want to do this in a resource-efficient manner. You'd be aware that universities are not exactly floating in resources, so the more efficiently we can do this, the better. But ultimately, what we want to do is provide what Strathclyde terms an outstanding education and student experience. So it has to be an awesome experience for the student and make it worthwhile. So the kind of nuts and bolts of how we go about assessing work-based learning is the next thing I want to talk about. You can imagine with all these different employers and the kinds of work that they're involved in, we can't directly assess what they're doing in the workplace. So we can't go into the workplace and examine particular work products that they're creating. We can't sit beside them in the office and see what they're working on like you would in a perhaps more traditional apprenticeship. So we literally can't access the workplace in some instances. Confidentiality is also an issue, and the time as well of actually going into each of the employers and sitting with individual apprentices is significant. So what we do is a degree of indirect assessment. So we are looking at how they evidence their workplace activity through a portfolio of evidence. So what that means is basically they have to write up the work they're doing in the workplace in a way which we are able to assess without effectively breaking confidentiality, and in an authentic manner that we can be clear they have actually delivered that kind of work and they've had that sort of experience. So that's a very sort of simple thing to do in the sense of write up what you're doing in work and stick it in a portfolio of evidence. But that doesn't sound like too much fun, and certainly I'm sure that the apprentices would agree that would not be too much fun. So we want to make that more interesting, and we need to go beyond just that kind of mechanical accumulation of evidence. And we generally want to encourage a sort of wider engagement in work-based learning and think about how the apprentice can develop wider skills around all of this stuff as well. So this is the process that we've landed on, which I'll go through. So I'll kind of summarise this at the moment, and we'll talk a little bit more about the stages in sort of future slides. But effectively, the apprentice has to understand where they are in terms of their competency, so what they're doing in the workplace, where they need to focus on moving their competency forward. They need to think about specific areas that they want to progress next, and what we do is we get them to document that in a personal development plan. We then want them to act, so to take action to actually deliver the things they've identified, and then to reflect on that learning. So that's the part where they write up the evidence to reflect on what they've actually undertaken in the workplace. And they just keep going around this loop as well. And you'll see at the top of this, I've put the SFIA framework. So this is our guide around all this. So this is a framework and structure that we use to help them think about their portfolio, think about their competency, and think about how they progress in the workplace. So the first thing to talk about is the personal development plan, and we ask them to complete this every 6 weeks. And I'm sure some of you'll all have seen a personal development plan in some kind of form. We've got a pretty simple one. There's basically two key areas to it. So first of all, they need to set out a personal analysis, and then need to do the objective setting. Now, this is an accessible part of work-based learning, but what we don't do necessarily is assess, if you like, their objectives and their personal analysis, because we can't say, for example, if someone says time management is something they need to improve on, it's not really for us to say yay or nay to that, so we can't really assess that as such. But what we do assess is their engagement in the process. So that's about them completing the PDP, putting their best effort into listening to feedback that we give them on this, and then implementing that each time they go around this loop as well. So it's all about just that engagement, that conversation around it. As part of this, we very much encourage them to align their university PDP with whatever organisational objective setting they have. So there's no point in these two things being isolated at all. What we want to make sure is that all aligns, and we encourage that the line manager comes in and has a bit of a discussion around this as well, to make sure that the objectives that the learner is setting out align with what they're supposed to be doing in terms of the workplace and their overall organisational objectives as well. So personal analysis, I'm sure you've seen this sort of thing before, but we get them to set out their strengths, so the things that they believe that they excel in, they demonstrate on a regular basis. We get them to set out areas for development, which are things which they think they need to make progress in. We ask them to set out opportunities, so things that maybe particular events that are coming up or particular networks they have access to and such that can help them progress in their competency. And we also ask them to set out blockers, so things that may prevent progression of competencies. Initially, so we do use SFIA for this, but initially we sort of just let the apprentice think about these in quite generic fashions, just to get them going in all of this. So they'll come up with the very generic things around, organisation skills, time management and such, a lot of technical skills in there as well. But as time progresses, we get them to focus down and actually use the SFIA framework to identify specific things to work on. And objective setting, I don't need to say too much about this, I don't think, but the way that we do it is we ask them to set 6-week objectives and 6-month objectives. They have to be SMART, so we give them a lot of help in how to define a SMART objective. But what we also say is that each objective has to link to a very specific area for development. So if they've identified something that they think need to work on, they need to come up with an objective which links to that and which very clearly will help them progress that area for development. So for most learners, given that a lot of them actually are straight from school, when they join the programme, this sort of concept of personal analysis and objective setting, they're very new skills that they need to learn. So we give them workshops on this very early in the programme. We get them to do a little group exercise around all this stuff to get used to the idea and get thinking about how you conduct a kind of personal analysis and how you identify your strengths and areas for development in particular. And also lots of help around objective setting as well, and particularly on making sure the objectives are SMART. And we give them written or verbal feedback on each iteration of this PDP. So their learning advisor is the person that will step in, will discuss that PDP with them and give them feedback to help them refine and iterate on that PDP. And it is a continuous evolution. So, we just, it's every 6 weeks or so that they tend to submit this. So you just see a very gradual change in this as it goes through the programme. So I mentioned the thing that we're ultimately trying to do is get them to create this portfolio of evidence of competence in the workplace. And we use an off-the-shelf e-portfolio system to allow the apprentices to do that. And we mandate a particular format for evidence. So we use an evolution of STAR, which is STAR C. And the C part is really important because what we say is any piece of evidence that you write up, you must very clearly link it to one or more competencies that you believe that piece of evidence demonstrates. And what that means is that the apprentice is very clearly thinking about their development. So they're thinking about the gaps and they're thinking about how the pieces of evidence start to fill in those gaps. The portfolio system's quite good. We can give feedback on individual pieces of evidence, and what happens is that over time you see a sort of dialogue between the learning advisor and the apprentice as the portfolio builds up. So the learning advisor will suggest ways perhaps that the evidence could be improved, or maybe additional competencies the evidence could be linked to, and you'll see that evolution through the portfolio as more evidence is added and as that feedback is taken on board as well. And in terms of assessing this, we do assess two elements to this. So one is about the overall quality of the evidence, because we, for example, want to make sure that it meets this format. We want to make sure that it's very clearly linked to the competencies and such. But we also assess the quantity of the evidence, and that's to make sure that the portfolio overall is progressing in the right direction through the programme as well. So I mentioned the linking thing a little bit a minute ago. And evidence indeed can be linked to one or more competency. And what we ask the apprentices to do is to use linkage phrases. So I've given a couple of examples there, and what it's saying is basically making sure that it's very clear which part of this piece of evidence clearly links to the competency. And we do this because for three reasons, effectively. One is that it discourages the kind of scattergunning thing that sometimes we would see previously. So the apprentice will say, well, that probably touches on these competencies, so I'll just file those in and stick it against that, and that'll be fine. But what we're doing is really making the apprentice think clearly about whether the evidence touches on that competency or not. And then what it also does is it makes sure they draw out the particular element of the evidence that meets that or demonstrates that competency as well. So sometimes we see, although the wording doesn't say it, the evidence would imply that the competency is demonstrated. But by doing the linkage statement, we're making sure that the student has put in something specific in the evidence which really highlights that link, highlights the element of evidence that's linking to that competency. And then the third reason for doing this is it really helps the learning advisor to understand the apprentice's comprehension of the competencies. So if we can see from the statement the apprentice clearly knows what the competency means and clearly understands how that can be demonstrated, that's great. But if the linkage would indicate that the understanding of the competency is not good, then we can have that discussion with the apprentice as well and help them just understand a little bit more about that and think about ways which they could demonstrate that competency in the future. So just another kind of view of that whole process. So starting off with review the competency framework and portfolio, identify areas for development. So that goes into the PDP. The apprentice creates objectives in the PDP to progress areas for development, and then document the work undertaken as evidence in the portfolio and making sure that that evidence is clearly linked to the competencies, and they just keep going round in this circle, building up the portfolio. So I've not said too much about SFIA so far, and I'm going to talk about this now because I mentioned the fact that we're in a portfolio, so we use the professional skill programming or software development, but we are able to drop in other skills as required. So if we have apprentices that have got slightly different job roles, we can drop in other skills as necessary. On top of that, we use the 5 generic attributes, and that provides a sort of more comprehensive framework for their development, because it really is vital that the apprentices consider just not their technical competency, but the much wider skill set in terms of how you are a successful employee within an organisation as well. So the generic attributes provide exactly that, and it's about helping them build out that rounded skill set as well. Because we can drop in different skills, we can tailor this specifically for individual roles. So that helps us meet the requirement around working with apprentices from with different job roles. What's also key for us is using the levels of SFIA as well. So it allows us to assess, or for them to demonstrate competency pretty much from day one of the apprenticeship and all the way through to the end of the year 4. Now, what we find is that the apprentices tend to make a very rapid progression within the workplace. So they'll start out, do very simple tasks, and then by the end of year 4, they will be either managing projects, or taking on major chunks of work and being responsible for other people in the workplace. So there's a vast range of activity they get involved in. And the levels in SFIA are really key to us being able to facilitate them demonstrating that. So we start at level 2. We give them effectively their first year to do that. They've then got, I think it's about 15 months or so on level 3, and then the remainder of the programme, they're on level 4. Now, level 4 is absolutely challenging for them, and that's absolutely the point, because we want to set a very high bar for them to aim for 4th year. I will say some apprentices may progress more quickly, some less. I think, generally speaking, they will stick to this theme. The only exceptions will be perhaps if somebody has been in the workplace for a while and they undertake the apprenticeship with the same employer, then we may well move them to level 3 more quickly, and they probably don't need to demonstrate level 2. But we take a view in that. The learning advisor will discuss that with them and figure out what's appropriate with them. So one thing we have to do is think about how we help the apprentices understand SFIA. So we've got a few tricks around this. So first of all, the skill statements, we take those and we split them into very distinct competencies, and we group them by the skill area and then sort of number them. In addition, what we also do is provide additional commentary around all of that. So that helps the apprentices interpret the competency as well. And it gives them just a little bit more tailoring, just a little bit more, a few more bits of help in terms of thinking, how would that competency look in the workplace in my particular role? We also hold a few workshops with them where we get them to do little group exercises around the competencies to think about how they might demonstrate them. And also think about how they clearly link the evidence to the competencies as well. So that's all about helping them get up to speed with that as well. And then the other thing we do on an ongoing basis, there are little formative exercises that we give them where we get them to reflect on their progress in particular areas of the framework as well, to think about perhaps areas that are they have least progress, or perhaps areas where they've made lots of progress over a period of time, and to reflect and think about why that's the case, and think about how they can make more progress in that area in the future. And the other thing that we should start doing, just to bring it to life a little bit more, is to develop sort of scenarios, and which are basically a description of a situation in the workplace, and we ask the apprentices questions about that scenario. So to get them to think about, is a particular actor in that scenario demonstrating a particular competency, or what competencies are they demonstrating, or how could they do something different in that scenario? And that scenario thing is actually quite good, and just in terms of bringing it all to life a little bit more, and again, just giving concrete examples. The other thing we do, which I actually haven't listed on this slide, is we've created quite a significant library of example evidence that we give to the apprentices as well. So these are things that we've written, which we think are sort of gold standards around evidence writing, and they very clearly demonstrate different competencies as well. So we give the student the piece of evidence, and we also give them the competencies that we believe it supports, and we explain the linkage to give them more examples around all of that. So I've mentioned the learning advisor a couple of times, certainly early on. So every apprentice has a designated learning advisor. So they provide overall guidance to the apprentice. So they help discuss or interpret the competencies as applicable to the apprentice's particular role in the workplace as well. The learning advisor is also responsible for giving all sort of detailed and general feedback to the apprentice on their way through the programme as well. So they meet twice a term. It's a one-to-one meeting, and first of all, first thing on the agenda is to talk about well-being. So that's a key touch point for us in the programme in terms of understanding how the apprentice is getting on, how are things in the workplace, how are things at university, how are things in life in general, and that just allows us to get a little bit of a sense check of how the apprentice is feeling. And we then have a more structured conversation around the personal development plan and around the portfolio as well. So the PDPs, the feedback on that, feedback on their personal analysis and on their objectives, and then looking at their overall portfolio progress and discussing how particular gaps in the portfolio could be filled, or talking about particular workplace activities that are coming up and how those might map into the portfolio as well. and also just general feedback on their overall progression in the programme. So the key thing for us is the learning advisors all have some degree of industry experience. So they're very much in a position that they can help bridge the gap between the work and study. So they understand what it's like to work in an organisation, and they understand the sort of the technical aspects of study as well. So our employer partners are very, very important to all of this, and we sort of, there's quite a few touch points that we have with them that are worth highlighting. So we have an engagement workshop with them at the start of the academic year every year. So all the line managers and apprenticeship leads are invited to come along to that. We give them a quick start guide to work-based learning, so they know what we're doing in all of this, and we set out to them the expectations that we have in terms of how they will support the apprentice. So that can be things like making sure that the apprentice has appropriate work. It's as simple as that. We give them a guide to SFIA, so we make sure that they're aware of the competencies and how these can be demonstrated. And that's obviously tailored to wherever the apprentice is on the programme, the particular level that they're on as well. And they can also be engaged in an ongoing dialogue with the learning advisor. So if we think that things are not going well in the sense of the apprentices maybe struggling to fill out particular areas of the portfolio, then we can have a discussion with the line manager, and look at ways that the apprentice could be provided with the appropriate opportunities to demonstrate the competencies. And the other thing that we do is just to make sure that the programme is actually is kept current. We have periodic curriculum review events, so the employers come along and they tell us what they'd like to see in the curriculum, what's working for them, what's not working so well, and we do that about every year, 18 months or so. So I mentioned assessment a couple of times on the way through, but just to summarise how we assess all of this. So we're interested in two things. We're interested in how they engage with the process and also with the quality of what they're doing as well. And they get a checkpoint review, which is a sort of summary of their engagement on all the different dimensions of work-based learning. So we give them a very clear rubric which sets out the expectations around each of these things. And the apprentices get a feedback report twice per term, which is just like a Word document, which just summarises back to them their engagement and all of these things, and gives them some feedback and gives them a little graph as to how their portfolio is developing and a few other bits and pieces. So that assessment is undertaken by the individual learning advisors for their specific students, and then we do a little bit of a standardisation activity to make sure that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet and all of that. But I think one of the things, so across the various programmes that I look after work-based learning for, we've got about 145 students or so. So this could be quite a time-consuming activity. However, we want to do this because in terms of the feedback to the students, it's very important they understand where they are in all this process. So what we've actually done is spent quite a lot of time investing in automating all of this. So, for example, we scrape data from the portfolios and generate these graphs automatically just to make life nice and easy for everyone involved. And that means the apprentice gets lots of good feedback, but it kind of minimises the amount of time that we're having to spend generating all of that. So the fourth year project, I mentioned this at the start, the work-based learning in years 1 to 3 is a lead-in effectively to the fourth year project. And the way that we set out the project is there's two elements to it. One is about a workplace element where they are delivering something within the workplace, which is adding value to the employer. And then the second thing they have to do is to pull together a report, which is like a reflection on their level 4 competencies. So although by the time they get to the beginning of the fourth year, they should have spent quite a lot of time on the level 4, what they can do is they can use the actual project work as a means to round out the portfolio. So if they identify particular gaps in level 4 they think they need to fill, they can frame a project that will give them the activities they need to get the evidence to round out level 4. And the learner advisor will work with the apprentice and the employer on a suitable scope as well. So we'll give the employer guidance on how all of this works, and they can help frame an appropriate project for the student as well. And just to say a little bit about the portfolio report, so what we ask them to do is, for each of the level 4 competencies, is to explain their understanding of the competency, and that's specifically as it relates to their workplace and their particular role, to pull appropriate evidence from the portfolio and sort of summarise that and be very clear as to why that evidence clearly demonstrates competency, and then to reflect on the degree to which competency has been demonstrated. And what this means is that if apprentices have not had the opportunity to actually demonstrate a competency, they can still get a good mark, because what they can say is, well, I didn't fully demonstrate the competency due to lack of opportunity, but here are the things that I could do in the future that would allow me to demonstrate this. So they can do a little bit of research around that. They can look at senior colleagues and look at how they might demonstrate that competency. So what we're saying is, you know, ideally you want to demonstrate all of this, but if there are gaps, then the opportunity is there for you to explain to us your understanding as to how you demonstrate this in the future. And this also, it's about the platform for the next stage of professional development, because if they've identified ways in which they can move forward from where they are at that point in time, that will just help them in terms of their career, in terms of moving forward. So a little bit of standardisation. So there are 5 learning advisors delivering this, and most of this is actually one-to-one, so it's very important that we standardise and make sure that everybody is assessing to the right level. So I say these checkpoint reviews that I mentioned previously, they're prepared by individuals, but then we have a standardisation meeting where we walk through them and make sure that everybody's assessing to the same standard. We do sampling of evidence to make sure that the feedback on individual items of evidence is appropriate. And we also do sort of team discussion of evidence. So someone will post up in Teams a particular piece of evidence and say, what do you all think of this? And we will give our opinions as to the quality around that. And that just helps calibrate where we are in terms of evidence assessment. The other thing I do is I will sit in with learning advisors and their one-to-ones and just make sure that the meetings are run to the standard and that the appropriate topics are being covered and that the apprentices are all being told the same information as well. And then the final element of that in the portfolio reports, so clearly a significant part of their degree award, so those are all double marked as well, so we make sure that appropriate standard is applied there. So, and summarise, overall, we're trying to give the apprentices an outstanding experience. So the approach is about not just creating that portfolio evidence, but giving the apprentices skills to actively manage their career. So, you know, identifying their strengths, areas for development, and how they progress those. It should all align with organisational performance development review activities, and that's part of that conversation with the line managers to make sure the objectives that they're identifying are things which align in the workplace as well. The fact that we use SFIA for this, I think, really helps in terms of developing employees which have a more rounded skill set. So it's not just about the technical stuff, it is about how you are an employee in a business as well. And I think generally these things also encourage a wider contribution from the apprentice. So the fact that they are being asked to sort of network and work with other people, the fact that they're looking at different ways in which they can contribute to the organisation, I think, is very powerful. And obviously what it also does in terms of using SFIA is about building that awareness for them of a global skills framework, which they will probably use at some point in the future as well. And again, that thing about just that future career development, because we've embedded that sort of process of looking at where you are, looking at where you want to go, and thinking about how you move forward to get there. So what I've sort of presented today has really been an approach to work-based learning that's evolved over the past sort of 4 or 5 years. And next steps for us, I want to do a little bit more analysis around the apprentice portfolios and look at maybe perhaps where they are struggling overall to fill in or complete particular competencies, because that may mean that we need to provide additional learning material or additional ways in which to navigate the framework. or it could be that we need to suggest particular activities to employers to help with rounding out the competencies as well. I've put in quotes use of AI. I think, you know, not going into a huge amount of detail on that, but clearly at the moment, there's potential for apprentices to be using AI to help generate evidence and all sorts of issues with that, which I won't go into, but can they use it in a perhaps more sort of structured and sort of more appropriate way? And can we use AI to help with assessment and all of this as well? I would like to collaborate with other institutions to share this kind of experience and general with work-based learning and how we deliver work-based learning, and also placement activities. So our face-to-face on-campus students, a lot of them do years in industry and such. So how do we help make that a better experience for them as well? And out of all this, perhaps develop a toolkit with some of this material for education providers, but also for employers, because I think when graduates from the traditional route start with an employer, perhaps there's a number of challenges they face where they have the technical knowledge, but actually working in an organisation is new to them as well. So how do you round out that experience and those skills in that area as well? And I believe that's questions.
Thank you, Fraser.
I'll stop sharing that.
Wow, yes, that was a huge amount of really, really interesting information. And
yeah, that was
so I'm sure there's lots for people to reflect on. We've got some questions, and I'm sure others will come through. One of the things just to pick up on. So we've got a question. Let's pick from here. So Ryan has asked, how many students do you have per advisor?
Oh, so we have for an advisor, it's done by full-time equivalent. So 0.2 FTE will have around about 10 students.
Okay.
So in theory, allowing an advisor to work 5 days a week would have around about 50 students.
Okay. And that would be spread across the different years. So we'll be year one, year two, etc.
So what we do is the programme across the term effectively, we set out week by week which cohorts we're working with to spread the load over the term. So like weeks 1 and 2 are year 1, and then weeks 3 and 4 are year 2 and such.
Okay. And related, Master's asked a question about the typical workload for a learning advisor. So is that a full-time role that they're working on?
So it's a combination. So sorry, let me just see that. So we have some that are full-time, and we have some that work 2 or 3 days a week. So some work in industry and have the learning advisor role as well.
Yeah. I think maybe in general, what comes across, Fraser, your diagram with the employer support and the university support, you know, that looks really impressive in terms of the amount of support you're giving. And is there any how do you justify that? I suppose, you know, there's obviously, as you've said, there's a cost and an effort and all the rest of it, but you've clearly reached a model that you think is you know, the effort required rather than too little or too less as you've matured the program.
Yeah, it is a lot. As I say, it's way more, I think, than a traditional route undergraduate would get. I think for the employers, the reality is it's an investment, and because the apprentices become very productive very quickly, I think the payback actually happens quite soon. So yeah, it is labour intensive for them, but I do think they get value out of it very quickly in all of that. So I think some line managers are quite reluctant to take on the apprentices on the basis of it is like a huge amount of effort to look after them and think of appropriate things for them to do. But I think they do see the dividends out of that. And And if I look at some of the, like, when you see the fourth year projects and you see the kind of things that they're delivering in fourth year, you know, I've seen apprentices deliver things which save companies thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds as a result of their work. And I've got sort of 3 or 4 very clear instances where that has happened. And that's massive. That's absolutely massive. So the payback on that individual is just absolutely stunning. You know, so, and it's not to say that everybody's doing that, but as an example of the way that it can work and the value that's been delivered, yeah.
Okay. That's a nice lead into the question from Ruchin, which is there's 2 questions here, but you can tackle them both. What are the key factors that drive successful transitions from apprentice to employee? And then on average, what percentage of apprentices receive permanent employment offers from their host companies?
So I should have been clear on that. So when I'll answer that around the other way. The apprentices are full-time employees, or not full-time, they are contracted employees to the companies. So where a lot of them, the posts are created and they will recruit into the apprenticeship post. So they already effectively have permanent offers, so they are permanent employees. In theory, if they don't complete the apprenticeship, the employer can terminate the employment. So it's not about the conversion from apprentice into permanent employee. They are permanent employees, but the risk is if they don't complete the apprenticeship, then their employment could be terminated. So it's kind of the other way around. Yeah. And the other thing is that we also see quite a lot of poaching going on. So when people complete their apprenticeships, the job market here in Glasgow in particular around technical employees is very, very strong. So it's not uncommon for someone to complete their apprenticeship in one employer and immediately move for quite a chunk of salary around that.
So the successful transition from an apprentice to employee. So I guess if we took that slightly different to the transition from apprentice to being fully effective in their role, and I was interested in some of those. What, you know, if you looked at the apprentice at the beginning, at the end, and what are the key things that people see are different going through your heavily work-based learning approach, and maybe a subtle one in there. I wondered whether there was particular business skills or elements of SFIA that recur as ones that are hard for apprenticeships to pick up on, or is it general? Depends who they are, what context they're in.
So I think when we see them at the beginning, they're all very focused on technical skills. So they all think about, how do I learn Java? How do I become really good in a particular language or technology or something? And then what we see is with the more rounded set of skills, they become more attuned to the fact that it's not just about the technical part, it is about that wider set of skills. And they think, okay, so, you know, being able to communicate to different stakeholders is really important. So how do I go about getting that experience? And then by the end of it, they realize actually those are the things that will make me good at my job and give me my career, as opposed to being an expert in a particular technology, which is one strand of it. So I think that's the power in it. That's the power of that more rounded skill set. And you'll see one other example is a lot of our employers run a lot of STEM engagement activities, and they go into schools and such, and tries to think, well, why? But actually they realise the importance of doing that, and they realise what they get out of that as well as what they give back in terms of doing that as well. So just that realisation that to be a rounded professional in this day and age, quote, you know, is a much wider thing than just being very skilled in a particular technology or two.
Brilliant. I'm just going to go back to the end slides. We'll keep on asking the questions, Fraser, but there were things that we wanted to pick up on. And Ryan, your questions about the level 3 one is you can explore something on this side here. So on the website, we've got a bunch of user stories, and a couple are particularly relevant to what Fraser's been describing. They're not describing the apprenticeship approach, and they've not gone into the detail around the work-based learning that we've got here. But the one here, the York University one, has a year in industry, which tackles the aims for level 3 of competency. Because it's only a year, it's focused very much on what can be achieved in that space, and uses a similar approach to what Fraser described, but differently. And this is what I think is really useful to be first taken on board, is how you need to work out what you're trying to do, and then wrapping around the processes and the use of SFIA in terms of making that happen. So that's there. I'll put a link in the slide. And then the other bit that we were keen on, I don't know whether, Candace, this was your question, but we would like to try and use the interest in this webinar and others to say, can we get a group of education providers or employers who are interested in this topic to have a more informal sharing of what can we do, how can we share things. The webinars are great, but they tend to, because we have so many attendees, we can't get into a level of detail to expand on this. So the offer is open. We're really keen to hear from people in this space, and we can take some of that forward. So, Fraser, let me just pick another couple of questions. These are, we may not get them all in, but Massa's asked a question, which is, do you have SFIA certified trainer as learning advisors? And maybe we put that a little bit more generally for you. How do you help the employers, students, and learning advisors learn about SFIA? Which you tackle those.
So not certified as such. So we have developed our own material around this, just in terms of taking the framework, and it's very, I suppose in some sense it's similar to what we do with the apprentices. So we actually have a handbook for all of this, which explains how to apply all of this stuff. A lot of it is actually mentoring effectively in all of this. So there's quite a sort of onboarding process for new learning advisors, and they get a lot of support in terms of either sitting in on meetings with them, doing sort of peer review of what they're doing in terms of looking at evidence. So there's a lot of kind of healthy discussion in the team about the competencies and how we feel those should be demonstrated. So it is more kind of a peer-based approach to doing that.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. And then you mentioned the automation. So Ryan had asked a question whether any examples of software technologies that you're using for that.
So being software engineers, we've put all this together ourselves. So we just use Python and Selenium to basically go and scrape data from different sources. So that includes the ePortfolio system, and we have to do that because the ePortfolio system, which I won't name, doesn't have very good reporting. So we've been kind of forced to do that to get access. It's not ideal, but it saves us a lot of time compared to individual learning advisors going through individual portfolios. So we do that, and also a virtual learning environment as well. There's lots of data on apprentice engagement there that we take and we scrape from there. And then what we do is we put that together, and we have several things. One is it's used to drive the checkpoint reviews, so it would automatically generate fair chunks of the checkpoint reviews, but it also drives a Power BI dashboard as well. So an individual learning advisor can go in and look at their apprentices and get a sort of summary view and see, where are they engaging, where are they not engaging, how's their portfolio looking, and all these kind of questions. So where does the learning advisor need to focus their effort for a particular apprentice?
And what's the ePortfolio tool that you use?
It's PebblePad.
PebblePad, okay. Right, we're just about running out of time. So I just want to say thanks very much, Fraser. You put a huge amount of effort in putting this together for us. The case study that you put together, we'll put it on the same place where we put the video, the recording of this session and the slides, and then people can get hold of that. Do you just want to explain what's in the case study and how it complements what you've been describing here?
Yeah, so I mean, it pretty much, I think, follows almost the pattern of that presentation, and just says a little bit more about each of the elements. So it just really builds on the slides.
Okay. Brilliant. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for the questions, and please get in touch. We'd like to hear from a group of people who want to extend this, and what it could lead to would be some stuff that we put whether in the framework or guidance that we share. And typically when we've had experience of putting these together, people who've joined in, can learn a lot and tailor and update the practices that they might take home in their universities or employment. And I think Fraser's absolutely right that there's a lot of useful stuff in what Fraser's described that could be, with a bit of tailoring, be used for graduate programs or any early careers, people getting used to working in the workplace and how it's different. That could be really applied differently. So thanks very much, Fraser.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.